Welcome to the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast.
Hashtag hosts and the HQFM quiz and bingo software are proud to sponsor the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast. With HQFM quiz and bingo software, you can use this interactive quiz software at any venue. All you need is an internet connection. Go to hashtagquiz.co.uk for your free trial today.
Hello and welcome to Catherine Vandome and Me. And today I'm joined by an incredible doctor who is a naturopathic physician and medical director of UK Medical Freedom Alliance. She's also a multi-award winning author of books, including this particular book about chronic fatigue syndrome, where she says it's mitochondria, not hypochondria. And it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce onto today's show the wonderful Dr. Sarah Myhill. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Catherine, you're very kind. Just to let you know, I've actually updated that book again. The most recent version has just come out, so this is the third version. And the reason I updated it is because my patients who I see do not have the time or energy to wade through large books. And that is the absolute bare minimum that everybody must do. So it's very concise. I hope there's not a syllable wasted. That is a very good starting point for anybody with a fatigue syndrome.
Fantastic. So it doesn't just cover ME, is that right? Is it like a cross spectrum of the post-viral and all of the other sort of interchanged diagnoses? Is that correct?
That's very good. I mean, the point is that chronic fatigue syndrome and ME and post-viral syndrome, these are not diagnoses, they're clinical pictures, and we have to ask the question why. It's all about looking at mechanisms. So that covers the two main threads, which is poor energy delivery mechanisms, and that's the clinical picture of fatigue, and then inflammation. And when you have poor energy delivery mechanisms and inflammation, we call that ME. So it addresses all those issues, yes.
Fantastic. And you obviously, of so many guests that have been on, we've had Dr. Raymond Perrin, we've had Dr. Nigel Spate, and it's an honour to have you as one of those leading pioneers, if you like, who has devoted her life to the treatment of this condition in particular. And it's a great honour to have you onto today's show, sharing your wisdom with the world. So thank you. And if I can call you Sarah, and you're welcome, Sarah. You're welcome to call me Cathy. That's what my friends call me. So, and yes, it's lovely to have you on today. So can I just ask, first of all, Sarah, if you can just give a little brief synopsis before we take you back in time to what got you attracted in particular to this particular condition and of course health in general. But first of all, if you can just give a brief hybrid of this plethora of gifts that you have to let people who haven't yet had the pleasure of meeting you. I'm sure most people do know who you are, but just give them a little bit of a taste of who you are, quite literally, because obviously it's diet is one of your forefronts.
Okay, well, I went to medical school in the 1970s and qualified as a doctor in 1981 and went straight into NHS hospital medicine initially, and then I worked as an NHS GP. And, I came out with, top of the year and thought to myself, I'm the best doctor in the world. This is going to be easy. And within a few consultations, I realized that I didn't know anything at all, because the questions that my patients wanted to ask was, why do I have this? Why do I have high blood pressure? Why do I have eczema? Why do I have heart disease or whatever? And we were not taught that at medical school. We were taught basic anatomy and physiology, and then we went straight into pharmacology, where all conditions had a drug outcome. So if you had heart failure, high cholesterol, depression, whatever, the outcome was drugs.
Yeah.
But actually, people don't want drugs. Because they don't get to the root cause of problems, they simply suppress symptoms. So in the early 1980s, I started asking the question, why? Why do babies have colic? Why do children have eczema? Why do others have asthma or whatever? And that is where it got I started to get interested in diet and nutrition and supplements and detox regimes and so on. But the biggest question of all, and this in the 1980s comprised an estimated 40% of all consultations, was the patient who was tired all the time. And I had no idea how to treat that other than drink more coffee, which, as we all know, is no answer whatsoever. It just, it's short-term gain, long-term pain. And so I started getting interested in the mechanisms of energy delivery. How is it that the body generates energy, and how does that manifest clinically? And that led me to my favourite subject, which is mitochondria, a subject that we learned at biochemistry during the 1970s. And we promptly forgot it. And the reason we promptly forgot it was because it had no clinical application, or apparently no clinical application then. But fast forward to 2024, and we now know that mitochondria are implicated in any disease you care to mention. They're important in dementia, in heart disease and cancer, and they are centrally important in chronic fatigue syndrome, because without mitochondria to generate energy, you can't do anything at all. So in the 1980s and 1990s, I worked for nearly 20 years as an NHS GP. And then towards the end of the 1990s, I found I didn't have the clinical freedoms that I needed to be a good and effective doctor. In fact, I got my wrists slapped because my prescribing budget was so low. And that meant if I wasn't prescribing drugs, therefore I must have been a bad doctor, mustn't I? So that's how doctors are judged, within the NHS. And that sort of medicine was not satisfying to me, intellectually or practically. And by then I'd acquired people who wanted to consult with me outside the NHS. And in 2000, I set up an independent practice, which financially was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. But hey ho. And so now I work from home as an independent medical practitioner specializing in naturopathic medicine. And naturopathic medicine, you can call it what you like: ecological medicine, functional medicine, alternative medicine. It doesn't matter what the name is. The basic tenet is we have to ask the question why. Why does somebody have that fatigue? Because if you can identify the mechanisms, then that has obvious implications for management. You can actually put in place logical, effective and safe treatment regimes. So that's where I find myself now, still on a very steep learning curve, but I think I've accrued enough knowledge to be useful to other people. And that's why I started writing books in the last few years, in order to make this available to everybody.
Well, that surmises you beautifully, Sarah, and that's my experience in unpacking over the last 11 years since I collapsed. Unpacking whys, as you said, and when you are dissatisfied for whatever reasons with the protocol that is being intellectually given and presented to you, then you realise either you carry on down that protocol or you take stock and think, I have to look at this independently. And as severely poisoned as I was, I had secondary carbon monoxide poisoning. So I myself, Sarah, have ME, fibromyalgia, Ehlers-Danlos, mast cell activation syndrome, electromagnetic sensitivity. As you say, these are, and I agree with you, these are diagnosis or conditions or state of being, rather than, in my opinion, a label. You slap it on and there's no recovery. I think identically to yourself that what one person calls a diagnosis, which makes you feel like, oh my goodness, this is for life, and that there's no hope, and I did feel hopeless, is, in my opinion, it's a disease state. I don't call it disease, I call it a disease state. And of course, you've got the emotional, the physical, the chemical, and as you quite rightly said, underpinning that is the mitochondria dysfunction. And from my understanding of Dr. Perrin, who's been on, there's also a structural abnormality of the spine and cranium, perhaps in a predominant subset, but as I'm sure you agree, there's a subset in all these different areas. Oh. And like a tree, it starts with the structure. So in my personal case, having this plethora of, sadly, secondary issues, I I felt that if I ever got to the point that I can today to sit up and talk, that I would be in a perhaps one of the best positions to be able to help share my story. And of course, I've got a recently published book that Dr. Perrin and Dr. Nigel Spate have appeared in, giving testimonials to the accreditation of what they have incredibly done. And I'm so honoured and privileged to bring you now into the unit, because I have met you before. I've seen you, I think, guest lecture at one of Dr. Perrin's conferences many years ago, when I think I only had 2 brain cells working at that moment. But the point is, very intrigued by you, and I can't wait to hear more about you, Sarah. So that's your backdrop. Obviously, you've got the updated version. Can you just read us the updated version of your new book, in case anybody's got ME? They struggle to go beyond in time limitations on a podcast. What's it called, Sarah?
It's called exactly the same as the second one, the one you showed previously, but it's an updated version. So, diagnosis and treatment of chronic fatigue syndrome and myalgic encephalitis and long COVID, and again the same title there. It's mitochondria, not hypochondria.
And I love that, because anybody with ME, we all share this burden that many of us faced, and
Yes.
people think I had it easy. Now, I've got an Oxford graduate sibling and a family who are mathematical and logical and highly educated, lots of teachers within the family. And they have really, really struggled to unpack and understand how somebody like myself, I was a Jessie J tribute. I was jumping off the front of the stage, doing all these massive shows as a stand-up comedian and a professional singer as well. And how I could go from that, literally in my case, it was overnight. I literally came off the stage, collapsed, and nearly died in bed, and I couldn't even turn my head on a pillow. So I knew that if I could ever get to the point, I had the blackout curtains, all of the what I call the extreme severity symptoms, and I'm very, very lucky to be alive. And if it hadn't been for a combination, as you quite rightly said, of your diet advice, Dr. Perrin's structural lymphatic drainage, Dr. Nigel Spate's wisdom in the medical field as well, and all of you insightful practitioners in your fields, then I very much doubt that I'd be here today. So it really is a privilege. Luckily, I was a comedian, so luckily I was laughing my way through. But I remember there was about a year and a half where I couldn't even laugh because it hurt. And then that's when I knew there was something wrong, as soon as you lose your laugh. So luckily that's back, and that's my most important necessity for life. So laughter is the best medicine. So take us through, Sarah, your books, because first of all, I want to hear about the diet, and that is your wisdom and toolkit. So take us through that, Sarah.
Okay, well, the first thing to understand is that we all have a certain amount of energy that we can spend in a day, and if you spend more energy than you have available to you, then you will die. Yeah. So the body and the brain have to, as you have that amount of energy, whatever that may be, and you spend it as the day goes on. And if those, as those levels get close together, the body and the brain has to give you symptoms to stop you spending any more energy. And those symptoms have to be very serious. They have to be very severe. They have to be very painful. Because if they weren't, you just ignore them. You go on spending energy until you overspend, and then you die. So the symptoms that people experience are very important. It's how nature protects us from ourselves. And if we didn't experience that fatigue, that foggy brain, that low blood pressure, those symptoms of POTS, then as I say, we would just overspend, and that would be the end of it. So what we have to do, the first thing that everybody has to do is they have to learn to pace their activity. It's very boring. But if you don't pace your activity, you will never get well. So pacing is terribly boring, but also terribly important. Now, we all get tired at the end of a day. I should be tired by the end of today, but I will have a good night's sleep, and I shall wake up tomorrow morning, and I should be as right as rain. But if you spend a certain amount of energy in the day and you pay for it the next day, you experience post-exertional malaise. That is pathological fatigue. That reflects tissue damage, that reflects biochemical damage. So again, pacing is really important. You have to pace so that you do not experience post-exertional malaise. So after that little lecture, I then start talking about energy delivery mechanisms. And the analogy that I love to use is the car analogy. And for your car to go, you've got to have the right fuel in the tank. And that's all about diet and gut function. You then have to have some oxygen, because obviously we all know that if you turn off the oxygen supply, then you will succumb very rapidly. And that's all about breathing techniques. And then we have to look at the mitochondrial engines. So every cell in nature, or pretty much every cell in nature, bar a few lowly yeasts and microbes, to be alive, they have to have energy, and that's generated by mitochondria. So mitochondria in those green leaves out there, in those sheep, in my dog, in you and me, are exactly the same. It's a fundamental engine that generates energy. And to generate energy, it has to have the right fuel in the tank, and it has to have oxygen to burn. And then we have the control mechanisms. So we have the thyroid accelerator pedal and the adrenal gearbox. So those are the five, drivers. Those are the five things we have to consider in anybody with an energy delivery issue. Now, when I first started off treating people with fatigue syndromes, well, not when I first, because of course I've learned a lot since then, but I would give people a shopping list of things to do. I now know, and what people would do is they cherry pick the easy things. Oh, I'll take a few supplements. That's easy. Oh, I'll do a bit of this. That's easy. And the hardest thing to do, and the most difficult thing, is to change your diet. But that is the most important thing you have to do. And again, when people say, well, what should we be eating? What is the correct food for humans here? Always go back, when you get difficult questions like that, I always go back to evolutionary biology, because our gut and our whole bodies evolved over hundreds of thousands, nay, millions of years, eating a particular food. And those diets were called paleo diets. Now, the problem with modern diets is that we no longer eat paleo diets where we get our calories from fat and from fiber. Our modern diets now mean that we get our calories from carbohydrates and sugars and ultra processed foods, dare I say. And the problem with those foods is they are very addictive. And once we start eating them, we can't stop eating them. Now, you will turn around and say, well, of course, primitive woman had access to fruits and nuts and seeds. And the answer is yes, she did, but only for a short window of time, and that was called the autumn. So as we migrated and moved away from the equator, the big problem that faced the primitive people were surviving the winter. So the way that we cope, we evolved mechanisms that, because of course we all know that there is a glut of food in the autumn, isn't there? The seeds ripen, the fruit trees ripen, the root vegetables come to fruition, and we developed an addiction gene for carbohydrate, and it switched on that addiction gene, so we ate carbohydrates in an addictive way. So we didn't stop eating when we got full, we just kept on eating and eating and eating, and we got fat instead. Now, fat is a highly desirable asset to survive the winter, because in the winter, those carbohydrates are not there. We couldn't store them then. We didn't have deep freezers and drying machines and whatever. And we survived the winter on our fat stores and by maybe a bit of hunting as well. The problem nowadays is carbohydrates are available 365 days of the year. And if you want to, you can buy strawberries at Christmas. I mean, it's outrageous that that should be allowed, but anyway, that's the case. So we never switch off our carbohydrate addiction gene because those foods are freely available. We can just go and buy them. And it's made even worse by ultra-processed foods and sugars, which are even more addictive than carbohydrate foods. So the result of this is we now have a whole population of people who are fat and fatigued. Now, there's a very interesting relationship between food and energy, which has to do with what we eat and when. So again, we have to go back to evolutionary biology to work this out, because what controlled populations over the hundreds of thousands of years is food supply. So when food was in abundance, our best evolutionary ploy was to eat it and eat it and eat it and get fat and sit around and do nothing, i.e. don't spend any energy because we want to get fat. So what this means, and it's very counterintuitive, is in the short term, eating food makes you fatigued. By contrast, when the food is not available and we are fasting, we're I don't say starving, but but we're fasting, then the brain works better and we have more energy. And that's what we need to be in a state of in order to go out to hunt, to farm, to fish, to get clever, to cooperate. So fasting gives you more energy in the short term. Obviously, it's not sustainable forever. But we are now on a treadmill of food addiction, eating carbohydrates and sugars, and feeling fatigued all the time. In fact, I produced another little book to try and explain this to the layperson. And I called it The Energy Equation. And the subtitle is From the Naked Ape to the Knackered Ape.
Because I like that.
That is what we are now. We are knackered. And everybody complains of fatigue. Everybody would like to have more energy. So it doesn't matter who's listening to this podcast. Doesn't matter who's if you've got chronic fatigue syndrome or ME, if you're an athlete wishing to improve your performance, or if you're a normal person who would like to have more energy so they can get more done. The starting point to treat all this is the diet and the gut function, and then we can go on to the other stuff as well. So when you get a shopping list of stuff to do, don't skip the diet, because that's what it's all about. Now, there are two aspects to the diet. The first aspect is it has to be paleo. Cut out the dairy products and cut out the gluten grains. And there are so many reasons for doing that. I came into this whole area of medicine because I got interested in allergy. I discovered that the reason my daughter had intractable and terrible colic whilst I was breastfeeding her, because she was dairy allergic. And when I gave up the dairy products, her colic disappeared. So did my snotty nose. So did my asthma and chronic cough and all that. And I just felt so much better.
And so did, can I just interject, Sarah, and say, and so did my hay fever. So it's incredible, isn't it? And but I'm sure you agree, it's not necessarily the dairy, it may actually be the chemicals from products that are injected into said animals that are also causing these inflammation markers. And that I think I gained that wisdom from you and reading your book. So you take over, because you're the expert.
Oh, bless you. So and giving up dairy products is important for other reasons as well, because dairy products are a major risk factor for cancer. Why? Nature intended dairy products for young mammals. Young mammals, if they don't grow very quickly, they get eaten by saber-toothed tigers. So all dairy products contain growth promoters. And if we don't want to get cancer, we shouldn't be consuming growth promoters. Sugar is also a growth promoter. That is also a major risk factor for cancer and a risk factor for other reasons. So dairy products dairy products, again, they're a risk factor for heart disease because of the proportion of calcium and magnesium in them. Too much calcium, too little magnesium. So dairy products, they're going to be out. The only safe dairy product is butter. The safest part of milk and dairy products is the fat. And butter and ghee are permitted on a paleo diet, so long as you're sure you're not allergic to dairy. I can get away with a little bit of butter, but not other dairy products.
Can I just ask on that? Sorry,
yes.
Sarah. The reason I'm interjecting is just in case there's people at home wanting to ask certain questions. And of course, because I'm living it and trying to copy you and your wisdom, we have Kerrygold butter. Would you say that was an acceptable? We have just a tiny bit. I tend to use coconut oil for cooking. Coconut oil is just, I use that for as a substitute makeup now. I don't have any makeup. I use it as a health product for everything, coconut oil. And I give that to my dog, a teaspoon a day for my dog as well. And it helps gut function, because you're going to move on to oils and that essential. But I would just want to ask that just a little bit of Kerrygold butter in a pan, if I'm making scrambled egg, is that okay?
Of course, absolutely fine. I mean, butter is a fantastic food. And yes, we should be cooking with butter because it's a saturated fat. Yeah. What we mustn't do is cook with oils, because when you cook with oils, I mean, in nature, all oils, cold pressed, they're all cis oils. They're all left-handed oils. But if you cook with them, or if you hydrogenate them for making margarine, then some of them will flip into right-handed, and they're called trans fats, and they don't fit enzyme systems, and they are so damaging. So I'm delighted to hear that you cook with saturated fats. We should all cook with butter, coconut oil, lard, pig fat, goose fat, duck fat, or whatever. Never cook with olive oil, sunflower oil, rapeseed oil. They're absolutely terrible for us.
Absolutely. No, I would agree with you there, Sarah, on that. Now, I just want to interject before we go on with your wisdom. Would you have a moment with me? I have a little wriggly dog here, Tinker, who wants to meet a world-leading celebrity. And if you can just quickly go and grab your dog, we can do a moment of hello, Sarah, if that's okay.
Just come here. Well, she always...
There we go.
She always sleeps on the desk
Look at
next to
that.
me.
We'll say a quick hello. This is Tinker. He's my co-guest on the show, the Catherine Vandome and me. And today, Tinker, look who's on the show. We've got Dr. Sarah Myhill. And what's your beautiful dog's name?
She's called Nancy. She's 12 years old. She's a Patterdale Terrier, and she's my best friend. We do everything together.
Fantastic.
And now she wants to go and sleep back on her bed again.
I was just going to say they're not daft, and Tinker's getting down as well. Sarah, would you believe, thanks to you, Tinker is actually 16. So he's doing very, very well. And there's been moments where I thought he's not going to survive over the last few years. But thanks to integrating the coconut oil and following some of your modalities, of course, you know, thank you very much. You've helped save Tinker's life.
And of course, all dogs, they too should eat an evolutionary correct diet, which is raw meat.
There you go. Yeah.
Now I have to admit that Nancy does like her liver lightly fried, but otherwise she eats raw meat, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why she's fit and well and healthy, aged 12 and a half.
Absolutely, because it's their joints as well. I mean, I've got Ehlers-Danlos, and I do worry. They do say, I don't have my own actual children, but he's my son. They do say that genetically, sometimes you can very much link with your pet. And and Tinker and I have both got joint hypermobility. Yorkshire Terriers are known for it. They're also known for losing their teeth by the age of about 5 to 7 years. But they're known for that, and yet Tinker's still got many of his teeth. So it's we brush them daily. I mean, I want you to just say a couple of things about animal care as well, because I know that do you live on a farm? I think you've got sheep in the garden, is that right?
Well, I have a small holding. It is actually registered as a farm, but I keep pigs. Much of the farm I plant up with trees, and then I've got chickens, of course, and ducks, and ponies and horses and all sorts. So yes, I love my animals.
You do, and you're a horse rider, of course. That's something that you really enjoy, and that's what I wanted to bring everybody's understanding of yourself, is that you are, like me, an animal lover. So whatever you're doing to yourself that's giving you this vitality, and you look so amazing, Sarah, as well from it, that transcends. People listen if they can see that you're doing the same wonderful ideas and ideologies with your animals as well, and that they're having a vital, long-lasting life. Do you brush your little dog's teeth, or have I gone too far with the care there?
Well, what makes for well, you do no harm brushing teeth, that's for sure. But what makes for rotten teeth is eating carbohydrates, and it's when you feed your dog biscuits or potato or foods like that, that's when that will spike the blood sugar. The blood sugar gets into the saliva and rots the teeth. And one of the joys, I mean, the other aspect of the paleo diet is it needs to be ketogenic. It needs to be very low in carbohydrates. And most people find that once they get established on a ketogenic diet, they no longer need dental treatment because they don't get dental abscesses. Their teeth don't get covered with tartar, and they have nice smooth enamel. So yes, of course I brush my teeth, but it's not as vital for me to brush my teeth as it would be for somebody who's eating sugars and carbohydrates all the time. And the other problem is, of course, if you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, then you're spiking your blood sugar, and the sugar will get into the saliva and fill the mouth with sugar even when you're not eating anything, and that will rot the teeth and will rot the gums. So a ketogenic diet is essential for dental health.
And would you say sweet potato is something that my second book is a diet book that I'm currently writing, and sweet potato is something that I thoroughly enjoy. In fact, Dr. Perrin often says, I wonder if it's the sweet potato and the carotene that's turning you yellow, or whether it's your poor liver function. Well, I think it may well be a combination of both, but I'm very intrigued to hear your wisdom on that, because can dogs eat sweet potato just a tiny bit, and can they have egg? So tell me about that, Sarah.
Egg would be fine. I mean, the point about the paleo ketogenic diet is, of course, you can have some carbohydrates, but you have to keep it at a very low level.
Yeah.
I mean, sugar is actually a vital for the body, because sugar is the raw material from which you make DNA, RNA, ATP, which is the energy molecule, and it's also essential for detoxification. So a little bit of sugar is essential, but because sugars and carbohydrates are so addictive, it's very easy to go over the top.
When you
So
say sugar, though, Sarah, and I must interject here, when you say sugar, you don't mean processed sugar.
no, I mean the body
Yeah.
makes its own sugar from eating vegetables, or potatoes or root
Yes.
vegetables or sweet potato or whatever. So a small amount of carbohydrate is helpful, is essential for the body. So much so that the body can actually make sugar from eating protein. So if you eat a lot of protein, then some of that can be converted to sugar. So it makes the point that sugar is important, but but it has to come into the body in the right form. Now, you can have too much carbohydrate, and sweet potato is actually quite a high GI food. It's higher than normal potato. So I do love potatoes, but the way that I do them is I parboil them, I let them cool down, and then I roast them in coconut oil or meat fat or whatever. And the point is, fat is very satisfying to us. When you eat a fatty meal, you don't need to eat a lot. You just have a small portion and you feel satisfied, and you just stop eating. So yes, sweet potato is fine, but not too much of it. And the way to know if you're having too much of it is to test. And I like people to test to see if they're in ketosis. Now, the most accurate test is a blood test, but guess what? I'm a wimp. I don't like putting a needle in my finger. So you can test with an inhaler, a breath test, or you can test with a urine test. So I do love my patients to test their urine. It's a very cheap test. You just buy keto sticks, and the little pink stick should go purple. And that tells you that you are in ketosis and you've done the diet well enough. So men, for example, who have got bigger muscles, so they've got a higher basal metabolic rate, often they're more physically active, or athletes, for example, they can get away with more carbohydrates because they burn off the sugars and the carbohydrates very quickly. But people who've got fatigue syndromes, of course, they cannot exercise. So you cannot rely on exercise to burn off the excess carbohydrates. So often they have to do the diet, much more strictly initially until things get start to heal and repair and their energy levels pick up. So I wouldn't recommend sweet potato too much, because it is high carbohydrate and it can be a bit addictive and might well knock you out of ketosis.
That's interesting. Right. So can I just ask you the basic, obviously people want to buy your books, which I highly recommend. But can I just ask you a basic breakfast, lunch and dinner that you would, just on a basic recommendation, just for anybody that has absolutely no idea what you mean by ketosis and things like that?
well, breakfast could be bacon, eggs, black pudding, boiled egg. I have very good recipe for paleo bread, which is only 2% carbohydrate. It's made from linseed, very easy to make. So a good old-fashioned fry-up is an ideal breakfast. And then lunch could be, again, paleo bread. Maybe I often have tin fish because it's quick and easy. Tin fish, maybe tin meat. If I'm in a hurry, leftovers from last night. Very often, but I actually just eat 2 meals a day these days. I do time restricted eating, and then evening meal. Well, starter would be very often I've just made some smoked mackerel pate, or any pate would be fine, or maybe oat cakes. And then main meal would be meat, fish or eggs with any green vegetable, any salad, and then a small amount of maybe roast potatoes or squash or swede, whatever's in the garden. I'm a keen gardener. And then pudding, again, I'm very lucky, I'm a gardener, so I've got a deep freeze full of berries. So it'd be gooseberries or blackberries or blackcurrants or raspberries. And I have that with coconut cream. And coconut cream, again, this is a very easy recipe to make. So you get yourself some, I use the Grace coconut milk, which is quite fatty, and then add quite a lot of coconut oil to that. And then a little dollop of sunflower lecithin, and I whiz it up in my Maggi mix, and it goes to a thick cream. And then you put it in the fridge, and it goes to an even thicker cream, so it ends up almost like clotted cream, and that's absolutely delicious. And I have that with my berries. But sometimes I make apple crumble, for example. So I have apples. You can make crumble, which is low carbohydrate from desiccated coconut, coconut oil. Lots of, cinnamon, cloves, allspice maybe, and you just crumble it up, put it on the top and in the oven. Very quick and easy and very delicious. So
Fantastic.
it's a very good diet. I do it all the time now. I run educational weekends here at my home, and we have people come and stay 3 days at a time. Of course, so we eat paleo ketogenic for the 3 days, and I can promise you, nobody is hungry. Everybody loves the food. And I talk for 3 days so they can work through their own problems. So, yeah, so, but the paleo ketogenic diet once you get into it, it's easy. The problem is the whole world out there is based on addictive foods. And you cannot go to, certainly can't go to a garage station. You can't go to a supermarket with all these addictive foods lined up. And the good foods, are in short supply. And guess what? I do understand why people use ultra processed foods or ignoosh, because they're so quick and easy and cheap and convenient. And when you don't have the energy or the time and very often the money, then you are drawn to those foods because they're cheap, quick, addictive, and give you a little hit in the short term. But they are disastrous for our health in the long term.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important what you've just highlighted there, because in the very early stages, I couldn't lift my arm to even have a drink or anything like that. So I do empathise with people who've gone to the extreme severe level that I went to. However, I had the intuition somewhere, somehow, to facilitate carers to be able to chop the vegetables and prepare the food, because I knew that diet had to come into recovery. I was already a health athlete. I mean, I was told by a practitioner that helped me that I was more severe than a celebrity sports athlete that he had treated. He said they rested more than you did. So, my rest time, I say, was a Zumba class. So I was painting all my garden fences by day. I would do a 3-hour drive to a gig. I would do a 2-hour show as a self show, then a 3-hour drive back. And then I ran a children's theatre school by day. And then, as I say, in my rest time, I would go to the gym and pull heavy weights. So if I say, because you don't know me personally, if I say that was my character, I think you have highlighted that my mitochondria maybe now need a lifetime's rest.
No, you were burning the candles at both ends, and you were achieving that on adrenaline. And
Yes.
adrenaline is another sort of addiction, and much can be achieved on adrenaline, but it's not sustainable in the long term. Another clue that life is starting to, or energy is starting to become a problem, is people turn to addiction to deal with that energy. So people who are eating a lot of sugar and fast carbohydrates and going for ultra processed foods, or they're drinking a lot of caffeine in order to keep going, or they're using a lot of cigarettes in order to deal with stress. So turning to addiction is often an early symptom of the energy is running out and people are using addictions in order to keep going.
And do you think, Sarah, as I do now, I didn't look at the emotional components connected to all of these factors. I was brought up with a very, like yourself, perhaps a very medical, clinical way of thinking. Well, you've got your legs sore, like you say, take this drug and that's going to ease such and such. I now look at the emotional components, and I've had a lot of guests and health experts looking at the emotional wisdom behind why things happen on this channel as well. Would you say that possibly people who are addicted to adrenaline, people who are chasing the next high, perhaps are running away from something? And that I highlight in my own book called The Truth About Me by Cathy and Vandome. I highlight that I had emotional issues, which I highlight in one chapter, that were perhaps forcing me to keep going more and beyond the average human being until eventually at 39, I collapsed and all the cards tumbled with it. Would you say there was perhaps that component there too?
Of course. And emotional stress, as I call it, kicks a hole in the energy bucket.
Yeah.
Because it's exhausting. I mean, I love, seeing patients and dealing with them, but by the end of the day, I'm emotionally exhausted because, you're pouring, and being a comedian, you do that in spades because, people are drawing. You probably don't realize at the time, but people are sucking, energy out from you effectively. And you're obviously, to be a comedian, you have to be very generous with your emotion, and equally to be any therapist who's effective, you have to love your patients a little bit. You're not going to get anybody well if you hate them. You've really got to love them a little bit, but that means giving emotionally, and that is also exhausting. So seeing people and dealing with people, and especially sick people, is exhausting physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I often see situations, in my work as a GP, where you'd have, the person who was sick, and then you had the carer, the person looking after that person sick, and the carer would drop dead before the person dropped dead. Emotionless, takes energy.
Okay.
And we have obviously we generate energy all the time to do stuff. And if you are pouring emotion into somebody, then you are spending a lot of energy. And what you learn to be as a professional is to empathize with people, but not sympathize with them. And they're two different things, because you can have empathy, which is, yes, I understand where you're at. But if you pour too much sympathy on them, you just drain yourself. And so you have to protect yourself. So if I'm seeing several people in a day, I have to protect myself as well as help them. So it's a funny old balance.
No, I hear what you're saying, and that's really interesting, because several people have asked me that, who are now health experts and therapists who have had ME, and they're saying sometimes I feel drained, and they didn't understand why. You've just very eloquently explained why that might be, and it's a lot to do with energy, metabolism.
Absolutely.
But you've to empathise but not sympathise, and perhaps it's separating those two. So thank you again. I knew you'd have the wisdom of that answer. So I do highly recommend anybody globally to come to you. And can people access you from all over the world, Sarah? How do people sort of find you?
Well, they just go to my website, and my email is just office@drmyhill.co.uk. But some people, they physically can't travel. And I mentioned the workshops that I do over a weekend, but I also do starter workshops where, and in fact, I did one yesterday where you can join, and I talk to 20 people at a time. And I start talking at 9:30 in the morning, and we finish at 4:00 in the afternoon with a lunch break. And I go through the whole of energy delivery mechanisms, the whole of inflammation. They send me test results, which I interpret for them, and everybody listens in. And so it's a very inexpensive way of accessing me, because anybody can ask any question at any time. And the idea is everybody moves on their health journey, because the path that we've developed is a very logical path now. There's no secrets there. There's no difficulties with it. All the tools. So my job is, as I call it, to give people the rules of the game and the tools of the trade to get well. And those tools of the trade do not include drugs. So these are all things that everybody can access. So, diet obviously is one, and only one person can put food in your mouth, and that's you. The correct supplements, and I'm very mindful that all my patients are what I call PBs. And to explain that, I'm going to have to tell you a joke. Now, I feel a bit bad telling a comedian a joke, but
no, you'll be a lot better than me.
but what PB means dates from an article I read in the paper some years ago about a merchant bank that wanted to target its 100 wealthiest clients for a new investment scheme. So it prepared a letter and then sent that letter down to the mail merge department, where, of course, you then mail merge. So it looks as if everybody who received a personal letter to Dear Lord this, or Dear Sir that, or Dear Mrs. that, or whatever. But they forgot to press the mail merge button before sending out these letters. So everybody received a letter that opened up, Dear Rich Bastard. So that has been subsumed into my language. So I have patients which are RBs, rich bastards, and patients that are PBs. And guess what? 99% of my patients are PBs, because they are unable to work. So the interventions that I recommend have got to be affordable, very safe, free from side effects, and multitask, i.e. do more than one job. So those favourite tools would include things like vitamin C, iodine, vitamin D, detox regimes. All these do multiple jobs, not just energy delivery mechanisms, but also impact on inflammation as well, and strengthen the immune system, and allow us to get rid of the chemicals in our body that shouldn't be there. So the regimes described in the book are all very doable. And the fact of the matter is, we should all be doing them all the time, because they also protect us from heart disease, cancer, and dementia. So what it means is I can tell my patients, okay, once you're better from your chronic fatigue syndrome, your best years are ahead of you, because you're not going to get cancer, you're not going to get heart disease, and you're not going to get dementia. And as I'm sure you know, dementia is now being called type 3 diabetes. And you can do all these things without having to go and see doctors, without taking drugs and prescription medication, which of course just make us sick. So it's essentially combining the best of the paleo world with the best of the modern world. Because guess what? I don't want to live out there in a rabbit skin loincloth in some hole and surviving the winter. I want my nice warm house. I want that food security. But at the same time, I want the best of the paleo world, which is the sort of foods they ate and the exercise that they did and the sleep hours that they took, and the tribal life is so important. I don't think that humans evolved to live in families, with one or two people living in a little box. We evolved to live in a tribe. And that's what I do. I live in a tribe, and I have 3 lodgers, two people in the barn. We all eat together. And the only problem is that Muggins is the cook.
I was going to say, when you've got a badge as honourable as that, Sarah, you're going to have to do all the hard cooking there.
But we combine in the garden. We combine, when the pigs need any work doing with them. We combine planting trees. We cut our own wood for timber. So, wow. And they are all joint activities. So we do all those things together. But everybody has their own space. They want to have their own space there. And that's how we should be evolving to. Yes. In fact, a friend of mine, she was very poor, brought up in the Glasgow tenement sort of thing. But she said we lived as a street, on that street. And of course, when I worked in Nottinghamshire, in Annesley Woodhouse and Newstead villages there, people lived on the street and they were in and out of each other's house all the time. The kids up and down played, the school was just down there. So they had a tribal life too.
We had a community, we had a commune. I am doing this channel as a way to put commune back into community, particularly after what has beset us all in the last 4 years and whatever our interpretations of that are. So the most important thing is whatever's happened, it has caused a global divide, and the purpose of this channel is to reunite everybody through this modality. And although it's a technological advancement, and with electromagnetic sensitivity I'm not a big fan of, it is a way of getting everybody to have health advice and expertise from highly esteemed professionals like yourself, Sarah, but also to unite and integrate and say, oh, well, I've never tried that, so let's have a look at this. And I like the way that Sarah's living, and I like the way that she's got lodgers, and I never thought about that, and bringing the tribe, particularly for people who are lonely, because as Absolutely. You say, and that's a wealth of insight and information of which I've attained over the years. We're not supposed to be led in bed screaming in pain all on our own, which many ME patients, sadly, when they do beset this, this does beset them, they end up living like that for the rest of their lives. And I remember thinking and praying, if somebody saves me, I'll spend the rest of my life thanking them. So it has been, a hybrid. But, Dr. Perrin for myself was the master of the ship in my personal case. But I then learned about yourself because you've gone and done some of his conferences. And of course, your wisdom on the diet front has been quintessential, because I, as a dancer, as an ex-ballerina at one point, food wasn't my priority. I did have a fast sugar bag of minstrels on a Friday night. I don't have time to eat. I believe that I was possibly born with a precondition to ME, and I suffered at birth, and my nana saved my life, which kind of starts my book. So I show the structural, the physical, the chemical and the emotional components within my book, The Truth About Me, which I highly recommend you might want to take a look at, because there are very few cases that perhaps have gone to that extreme level that have all of those different causations. And carbon monoxide, when you highlighted earlier, oxygen, and I mean, oxygen moves the lymphatic system, it drains the lymph, it detoxifies the body. And if I've got a lack of oxygen in my, as you quite rightly said, modern home, and there's something, and I had a broken flue pipe, you see, Sarah, in the kitchen, emitting carbon monoxide for 10 years. So all those factors, of course, build up. And then painting, if you stood still long enough, I'd have painted you. And never thought, well, actually, paint is extremely toxic. Absolutely. So you know, and I remember painting the garage ceiling with no mask on or anything, and all the debris falling into my mouth, and never thinking, well, this is going to hurt.
Not the debris, it's the fumes.
The fumes. But I know I'm talking about the debris, the black soot from the top of the, you know, the garage on top of. So whatever had got in my system should not have been there. But what's magical is when you have this awakening, and I want to inspire people today by talking with yourself to have that awakening before you're 39, and in my case lose the chance to have a child, because I'm now 50. I've just turned 50 this year. But then you can turn it back around and become like Benjamin Button. That's kind of what I want to inspire people to do. Take stock before your body warns you, as you said, and flattens you. And any advice there to anybody that's watching and thinking, well, I'm fine. I come from a family that we all are very strong, and we all say, well, I'm all right, I'm okay. But what would your advice to that be?
Well, you just have to do it. And as I say, the path is very well demarcated. It's very clear. You just, as I said to all my patients, just get on and do it, and then feel the changes for yourself. And the problem with is it's not a smooth ride. It's always a bumpy ride, because the business of transitioning from running on carbohydrates to running on ketones and fat, the first thing that happens is you get keto flu, because the body has to learn fat burning again. And one of the things, normally the body fat burns with thyroid hormones. So people who struggle to get into ketosis and stay in ketosis is often because they have an underactive thyroid. And instead of fat burning with thyroid, they fat burn with adrenaline instead. And that gives you the wired but tired feeling. And the underactive thyroid is very common and massively underdiagnosed. The doctors, all they do is they just look at the blood test, and if they see the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, is in the range, they say, oh, you must be normal then. But the majority of patients I see have secondary hypothyroidism because the pituitary is down, not the thyroid gland. So you can't rely on a TSH to diagnose an underactive thyroid. We need a free T4 and a free T3, and we need the clinical picture as well. So we use the blood tests to tell us if there is biochemical scope for a trial of hormones, and then we monitor that by how we feel. And if the pulse is slow, if you've got poor quality hair, if you've lost eyebrows, you've got carpal tunnel syndrome, if you've got voice changes, if you've got tendency to edema, you know, all these are clues that the thyroid gland is underactive. All these, they're all pointers, but you have to look at the whole picture. And you wouldn't want to start playing around with the thyroid until you sort out the diet, the gut function, and the mitochondria first.
Yeah.
Which we haven't got around to talking about. But the thyroid, as I say, is the, as I call it, the accelerator pedal of your car. And then you have to think adrenals. And with age, it's long history of stress. And guess what? We all have a long history of stress, don't we? Because life is like that. The adrenal gland will fatigue, and often adrenal support is helpful. So we have to do the whole package. And as I say, we always start with energy delivery mechanisms, and then we have to look to see if there's any evidence of inflammation there, because inflammation occurs when the immune system is busy, and the immune system may be busy for reasons of chronic infection, for reasons of allergy or autoimmunity. But again, the immune system is a standing army. It's enormously demanding of energy. So when there's inflammation going on, not only do you get unpleasant symptoms from the inflammation, which might be muscle pain, joint pain, gut problems, asthma or whatever, but it also, as I call it, it kicks a hole in the energy bucket. So ME is poor energy delivery mechanisms and inflammation, often due to chronic infection.
So thank you, Sarah. So you're explaining about the energy metabolisms in ME, and something that you really wanted to talk about was the gut health. Can I lead you on to that, Sarah, before we take you back and hear more about you?
Okay. So in order that we can demonstrate what is wrong with the gut, we have to first of all describe how the gut is healthy. Now, the gut, of course, is a tube. It's about 30 foot long. It starts at the mouth and goes right through to the anus. Now, the first 25 foot of that gut, I call the upper fermenting gut. I beg your pardon, I call the upper gut, which is the esophagus, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, and small intestine. Now, that part of the gut should be near sterile. Now, no surface in nature is sterile. There are always some microbes there, but it should be near sterile. The last 5 foot of the gut, the large bowel, that's where the microbiome is. And of course, that's teeming with kilograms of microbes there, and they do much good. Now, as I say, the upper gut needs to be near sterile. Now, the problem with Western diets is they are high in carbohydrates, and we are eating and snacking all the time. And by doing that, we overwhelm the ability of the upper gut to remain sterile. Normally, the upper gut remains sterile because of stomach acid, and stomach acid is very important because it kills any microbe that comes in and sterilizes the food. And that, of course, is a major way that we protect ourselves from disease. But if you overwhelm the ability of the gut to remain sterile, you overwhelm its ability to produce all that acid, then it turns into a fermenting gut. And that is very bad news. Now, because when you ferment, first of all, you have all these bacteria and yeast and possibly even viruses that suddenly the population builds up. Now, they do all that creates a huge amount of harm. The first thing is that they ferment foods into all sorts of substances which are toxic. So the best documented one is called the auto-brewery syndrome. This is what would happen if you sat down and ate through a pound of grapes, because the yeast on the outside of the grape would then ferment the sugar on the inside, and you would produce alcohol. And we know you can produce alcohol in quite large amounts. And guess what? If somebody gave me a glass of wine for breakfast, I wouldn't be able to function this morning. So by fermenting to produce toxic products, that poisons us. And it's not just ethyl alcohol. You can produce propyl alcohol, butyl alcohol, hydrogen sulfide, ammoniacal compounds, all sorts of nasties, D-lactate, all sorts of nasties, which then have to be dealt with by the liver. Now, the liver is an extraordinary organ. It picks up all the venous drainage of the gut and sorts it out. If it didn't sort it out, if the contents of the portal vein, which drains the gut, went straight into our systemic bloodstream, we would go unconscious, in a few minutes. Now, to do all that detoxing requires a huge amount of energy. So to give you an idea of how much energy, at rest, although the brain weighs just 2% of body weight, it consumes 20% of all the energy generated in the body. The heart at rest consumes 7%. The liver, when it's working hard, can use up to 27% of all the energy generated in the body. So if the liver is being poisoned by the upper fermenting gut, that's a massive hole in our energy bucket. That's energy that's being spent in the liver that we could be spending, having a walk up the hill or, sorting the garden out. So that's one big problem of the upper fermenting gut. The other big problem of the upper fermenting gut is those microbes in the gut are as hungry for micronutrients as we are. But guess what? They're first in the queue. So all those expensive supplements that we're taking just feeds those microbes and allows them to ferment even harder because they've got the micronutrients that they need. So that's bad news. But worst of all, having those microbes live in the gut they line the gut and they render it leaky. So we then end up with leaky gut. So all those toxins and poisons and microbes should be contained in the gut. There's potential for them to leak into the bloodstream. This is called microbial translocation or bacterial translocation. So you then get microbes spilling over into the bloodstream, which get stuck at distal sites in the body, and there they drive pathology. So these microbes stuck in the muscle will cause muscle pain, and that's called fibromyalgia. If they get stuck in the joints, they will drive inflammatory arthritides, like rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis. If they get stuck in the lungs, they can cause intrinsic asthma. In the skin, chronic urticaria. In the lining of the gut, inflammatory bowel disease, and so on. So a huge amount of pathology is driven by allergy to microbes from the upper fermenting gut. And then on top of that, the microbes themselves produce toxins. So if you are fermenting with yeast, then they produce their own mycotoxins, and these toxins are very poisonous. They literally things like mycophenolic acid, ochratoxin. These are all poisonous to the body. So as part of the upper fermenting, as part of the treatment of this, we have to do a paleoketogenic diet, and we also have to sort out this upper fermenting gut. We have to get rid of it. We have to restore normal gut function. Now, it's a very simple approach. Now we understand why we have these symptoms, these problems in the gut. And of course, the upper fermenting gut will present with reflux, with heartburn, with indigestion, with bloating, with pain, with with alternating diarrhea and constipation, etc., etc. So these are all typical of the upper fermenting gut. So we have to treat it. And the fact of the matter is, the treatment is very simple, and we should all be doing it regardless. And the treatment is, first of all, stop feeding them sugars and carbohydrates, i.e. do a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. And you can make that even more powerful by doing time restricted eating. So this is the next step of the evolution after you've got established in ketosis. We then do time restricted eating, where we aim to eat all our food within a 6-hour window. So these days I don't have supper, I don't have breakfast. I tend to have lunch at 1 o'clock, and I have my supper at 6 o'clock. So I have all my food within a 6-hour window. Now that has many, many advantages. One of which is it cleans up the upper fermenting gut, because suddenly you've got a bowel that has a stomach which has had no food in it for 18 hours. And therefore the stomach acid can really build up, kill off the microbes, and keep the gut sterile and clean. The problem with modern diets is we're having breakfast, snack mid-morning, lunch, snack mid-afternoon, supper, snack in the evening. The stomach is never empty. It never gets a chance to clean up its gut, and that drives the upper fermenting gut. Now, there's another very powerful reason why we should all move towards time-restricted eating. Now, I don't say you have to do that every day of the year, but you have to have at least some days where you're doing this, because we are producing cancers all the time. Throughout life, just from background radiation, this isn't toxins or anything, just from background radiation, that will generate about 10,000 DNA mutations every second. And some of those will be such that it may generate a cancer. So we are producing these cancer cells all the time, and we're also turning over tissues in our body, we're breaking down tissues, and we have these dead bits of cell floating around, dead bits of bacteria floating around, dead bits of virus floating around, or whatever. Now, the way the body mops up those dead proteins is a process called autophagy, autophagy, or self-eating. And that occurs after you've been fasting for 16 hours. So if you have an 18-hour fast, you then have a 2-hour window every day when you switch on autophagy and you mop up those cancer cells and you mop up those dead, you give the body a real good spring clean. Now, of course, primitive woman did this automatically because she never had 3 meals a day, did she? She feasted and she fasted. And on days when she feasted, food was aplenty, she lay around and got fat. And then food was in short supply, she was out there. And when you are hunting, you're fasting and you are running and you're physically active and you're using up a lot of energy and you are turning on autophagy. And that stops you from dying from cancer and other such nasties. So I say time restricted eating is a very important part of cleaning up the upper fermenting gut. But there are 2 other interventions I do as a routine in addition to that. I use vitamin C and I use iodine. Now, both of those are extremely inexpensive. A bottle of Lugol's iodine like that will last you months and months and cost about £7. And the point about vitamin C and iodine is they both contact kill all microbes. No microbe is resistant to them. So I like everybody to take vitamin C in the morning and iodine at night. Don't take them together because they knock each other out. One is a reducing agent, the other is an oxidizing agent. One is an electron donor, the other an electron receiver. It doesn't matter which is which. Just remember, don't take them at the same time. And the dose would be 5 grams of vitamin C in the morning. That's a teaspoon of ascorbic acid, which is very cheap, in a glass of water and down the hatch. And of course, I do that on an empty stomach. So that means you get a good concentration of vitamin C there, which will contact kill any microbes lining the upper gut. And then in the evening, before I go to bed, 3 drops of Lugol's iodine in a glass of water. And guess what? Iodine contact kills all microbes. And in addition to those very helpful properties, they are good antioxidants. They help us to detox heavy metals. They're essential for mitochondrial function. They're essential for brain function. They're good for the immune system, i.e. they do lots of other very important tasks as well. They both kill cancer cells. And somebody as old as me needs to know that because, we all know that the risk of cancer increases as we age. And so they're cheap and cheerful. So that then sorts out the upper fermenting gut. And what that means is that when you do take your nutritional supplements, which are expensive, at least you're going to get the full benefit from them.
Wow. My goodness, no, I'm pausing here because what a wealth of information you've just shared there, Sarah. So just brief that again. So people who come to you, they're going to get the opportunity to have a look at what their diet choices are today, switch them to the paleo choice, but also introducing particular vitamin supplements. Now, I do know that you also, I don't know if you still do this, have a vitamin B injection as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Sarah?
Okay, well that's another aspect, but again, using the car analogy, we need those 5 things for our car to go. But every 6 months or every year or so, our car needs to be serviced, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we service our cars, every night, and that's called sleep. And during sleep, we heal and repair. And a vital part of healing repair is the methylation cycle. Now, I think of the methylation cycle as our toolkit. So every car has to heal and repair your car. You've got to have a toolkit with spanners and chisels, well, chisels and screwdrivers. You can see what a good mechanic I am. And spanners and screwdrivers and whatever to fix our car. And our bodily version of that is called the methylation cycle.
Yes.
Now, the methylation cycle, a very useful marker of the methylation cycle is to measure your homocysteine. And we should all know what our homocysteine is. Because if your homocysteine is, it should lie between 5 and 10. If it's too low, or most commonly it's too high, then you cannot methylate and you cannot heal and repair. And that is a major risk factor for dementia, cancer, and heart disease. Now, if you go to see your GP, they won't even know what a homocysteine is. It's a shocking hole in medical education. The reason that shocking hole is there is because they are educated by Big Pharma, and Big Pharma does not want healthy people. Big Pharma wants unhealthy people so they can sell lots of drugs. So this is who's educating your doctor. Essentially, they become peddlers, drug peddlers, not proper health, physicians.
And can I just interject and say you have the wisdom to be able to say this because you, of course, were an NHS medical doctor. I think that's very important that we get that across. We do have various doctors who are not medical doctors, but can you just give me a little bit of insight into your medical history, Sarah, so that you have that wisdom yourself? You were an NHS practicing doctor, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I've been conventionally trained. I worked for 20 years in the NHS as a general practitioner, and in the last 25 years, I've been doing the work of a general practitioner, but with a naturopathic input. Yeah. So I don't use drugs. The only great loss is antibiotics. Antibiotics are very useful drugs, but of course they're very easy to get online, so people can purchase them for themselves because these days people can't get a GP's appointment anyway. But that's an aside. But the point is, your GP will not have heard of the methylation cycle and will know nothing about homocysteine. Now, another wonderful doctor, Patrick Holford, has set up a fabulous website called Food for the Brain. Everybody listening to this needs to sign up to that website. It's the biggest study ever done on preventing and treating dementia. He now has over 500,000 subscribers to that. And there are 3 important things we all have to do to stop ourselves getting dementia. And as Patrick points out, dementia is 99% preventable. And those 3 things are, first of all, eat a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, which we have discussed. Secondly, know what your homocysteine is. Thirdly, take fish oils. And you have to do all 3. Yeah. There's no good just doing 1 of them or 2 of them. You've got to do all 3 because there's so many synergistic actions between those 3. And to help you with the homocysteine, available on that website, there's a do-it-yourself homocysteine test kit. It costs £49.50, so it's very doable. And you can measure your homocysteine from a drop of blood at home. And on his website, and also on my website, of course, are details of how you can correct that homocysteine. Now, this is where the B12 injections may come in, because most people can correct their homocysteine with methyl B6, methyl folic acid, and methyl B12, and maybe some glutathione. But some people don't, and for those, B12 injections are very helpful. And again, anybody can buy them online. You can get them at sales at Dr. Myhill, and anybody can inject themselves, and it's a relatively inexpensive thing to do. But B12 is a very important anti-inflammatory, and it's also an essential part of energy delivery mechanisms. So again, it's another one of my favorite multitasking tools, like iodine, like vitamin C. It does so much good. So, and again, the joy of B12 is it's extremely safe. As a medical colleague of mine commented, the only way that you could kill yourself with vitamin B12 would be to drown in it. So that's not going to happen. And again, the whole thing is confused because the so-called normal ranges for B12 in a blood test are set incredibly low. You know, I saw one range the other day, I think it was 200 to 700. In Japan, if you have a B12 of less than 500, you're considered deficient. So we have all these people walking around who are demonstrably B12 deficient, but don't get any treatment because the NHS doctors say, oh, that's within normal range. Why do they say that? Because they're educated by Big Pharma. Big Pharma wants lots of people walking around with deficient B12s because then they're going to get diseases like cancer, heart disease, and dementia. And that's going to demand lots of drugs, isn't it?
Well, that's really interesting, Sarah, because I was given a lot of B12, I think it was, drugs by the NHS at the time. But my levels, when they were tested, I think what's really important to highlight to everybody listening today is to go to a professional specialist, because we don't want people suddenly injecting themselves with all these different things, because if they can't detoxify properly or there's blockages that I had in my system, you don't want to do something that could be detrimental. It's better that they speak with you first, as a highly esteemed practitioner and expert in this field.
That's very nice of you to say that, but you don't need to speak with me. It's all in the books. You see, my patients are PBs. You know, they're not wealthy. They can't afford my time. They can't afford me, and I haven't got the time to hold the hand of everybody in the world who needs it. This is why I wrote the books. I wrote the books because all the information is in there, and all this stuff anybody can access. It's all intrinsically safe. And as I say, the side effects effectively zero. And all these things will protect you from getting heart disease, cancer, and dementia, as well as everything else. And guess what? Having a high homocysteine is also a risk factor for chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, because you can't heal and repair.
Of course. So, and I was just going to, sorry to interject, Sarah, I was going to say that on the doctor's medical path, I was told mine was over 1,000, my B levels. You understand the levels.
That's and fantastic. I mean, that's great.
But the doctor said, they're too high. What are you doing? So you're actually saying reverse everything and understand that perhaps that was a safe level.
Again, ask yourself the question, who educates that doctor? Follow the money. Follow the money. And I've written a book on treating the thyroid, for example, and it's largely about the underactive thyroid. There's a little bit about the overactive, but that's relatively rare. But the subtitle is Do It Yourself Because Your Doctor Won't. And the shameful thing is that is the fact of the matter. Right. The doctors will just look at the blood test. They will only look at a TSH, and the reference ranges are quite honestly wrong. So the blood test can be very misleading. And I feel desperately sorry for people who go to their doctors asking all the right question. And instead of the doctor being honest and saying, I really don't know, but you know, this is how I started learning, having the decency to say, I don't know the answer to that, but let's try it. Let's look at it together. Because remember, all diagnosis is hypothesis that you would then put to the test. So, with the underactive thyroid, which is very common, you hypothesize that they have an underactive thyroid based on the blood test and the clinical picture. And then you would put that to the test by giving a trial of thyroid hormones and seeing how they feel. And happily, we can all access these. They're called thyroid glandulars. There's a preparation called Metavive, and the key is to start low and go slow. But get the books. All the details of how to do all this are in the books, because as I say, my patients don't have any, or most people don't have the money to, and I see myself in the role of a teacher. I'm teaching people to become their own physicians, to become their own doctors, because nobody is going to be better motivated to do all this stuff than you, the person that's sick. So say my job is to give you the rules of the game and the tools of the trade so you can do it. And the only person you should rely on is yourself. Okay, of course, there are lovely people like Raymond Perrin, other physicians, but they will only be with you for an hour or so at most, and then you're on your own. Yes. So you really do have to learn to get your head around these things, understand the intellectual imperatives behind it, and then, as I say, just do it.
And what you're saying is be your own doctor as well in that respect, following your incredible advice. So what I also want to say was my vitamin D level was 21. Now, obviously that's another, I mean, all of my vitamin levels and everything, they were off the charts, but I was told, oh, it's not that bad. Now,
It's
what's your
terrible.
thoughts on the vitamin D? What's your thoughts of a normal level, and is 21 low in your opinion?
That is far too low.
Right.
It's far too low. The reason that we all suffer from vitamin D deficiency is because we evolved in Africa, where we were running naked under the African sunshine for 12 hours every single day. Of course, we just don't get the sunshine here. We're all sunshine deprived. In fact, part of that is if you've got a dark skin, then you make vitamin D very slowly. And as humans evolved away from Africa, those with the dark skins didn't survive. They died from vitamin D deficiency. So our skins became paler and paler. So they're olivaceous in the Mediterranean and white if you're up in Scandinavia. And with very pale skin, what that means is you can make vitamin D very quickly from the sunshine. But guess what? It's cloudy today. It's freezing cold. You've got to have sunshine landing on the skin to make vitamin D. My dose of vitamin D from sunshine today will be 0. And it'll probably be like that through until, March or April. So we have to take vitamin D supplements, and we all need 10,000 IU daily, because I like to see the vitamin D levels nearer 200. Fascinating study. Looked at the vitamin D levels of people who came into hospital with COVID. Now, they measured their vitamin D levels on admission, and what they found was a direct inverse relationship between your vitamin D levels and your chance of death from COVID. And if you got into ITU and your vitamin D level was below 25, you had a 90% mortality rate. If your vitamin D level was 100 or over, you had virtually effectively a 0 mortality rate. So vitamin D is it's a very good anti-inflammatory. It's highly protective against COVID. We should all be taking it.
Right. Well, that's really, really groundbreaking for people to hear. We did get these things filtered through over the years, but not to the high end levels of what you're describing. And I also want to say this very importantly as well. I also used to wear factor 30 as a baby and 50 sun cream every single time I was going anywhere near the sun. And what I have uncovered in my own story, and what an incredible thing to find, is when I collapsed and was told just have 10 minutes in the sun, just 10 minutes, Sarah, because I was so toxic, I would burn and peel severely and we're talking Lancashire, we're not talking the Caribbean. 10 minutes at my most highly toxic state, and I got severe blistered burns just 10 minutes. In fact, as a baby aged 3, it's one of the stories in my book, I was admitted into hospital with 3rd-degree burns, my mum said, at Pontins in Morecambe, from the arm falling out the pram. Now, so that I was obviously highly toxic from birth, from different things, which I reveal. And obviously that level of toxicity seems to burn the skin. Now, I can lie out in the sun when we're blessed with it all day and not burn. So how is that possible? And the only thing that's changed is that the toxicity level in the brain, the body, and the whole system, because I've been going to Dr. Perrin now for 9 years, 8 of those almost every week, with a high level reaction, like you talked about the alcohol, those components. I used to say I feel drunk. I felt like Steve Martin in The Little Shop of Horrors. So I'd be laughing as he dragged my legs out of the clinic from just a very small detoxification treatment. So that's why I share my story, because that's how severely toxic I was. But what you're saying is get your vitamin levels up high, and go on, you expand on that, Sarah.
Well, there are two things. There are two issues we're talking about now. Sunshine obviously makes vitamin D in the skin.
Yeah.
And if you get good sunshine and enough skin exposure, you can make 10,000 international units in 30 minutes or an hour. So taking 10,000 units of vitamin D every day when there's no sunshine is absolutely essential.
Right.
You're talking about detoxification, which is another issue, because as you rightly point out, we are all poisoned. And as you rightly point out, you shouldn't put anything on your skin that you're not prepared to eat. So the anything goes on my skin, if anything, is coconut oil. So I was delighted to hear you say that.
Yeah.
And no, I don't use cosmetics either. Even from a child, I've always thought to myself, if people don't like me as I am, that's just their problem, not mine.
Well, do you know, that's where the emotional component comes in, Sarah. You have a great, admirable confidence.
No, I went to medical school in London. I was in
You went to
London.
medical school in London, but
Yeah.
your wisdom, your insight, and your intellect and your academia obviously helped to build up that knowledge in yourself. But perhaps you had a strong innate wisdom from childhood where you can accept me as I am or not at all. That's that's imperative, though, because I was an entertainer. Entertainers often don't love themselves enough. That's why they go into the career. Somebody give me a round of applause because I don't love myself enough. So there's the emotional component, which transcends many entertainers, not all necessarily, but certainly a lot. We're desperate to be loved, and we take a bow on the stage because we get a big round of applause every week, something that all other careers don't give you. And it's interesting when you don't have that round of applause and you're in bed for 11 years. In the early stages, you're missing it and wondering where it is. But the point is, Sarah, what you're saying is what I have now developed into. It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. It's what is going on the inside. And I've had to teach myself that as a lady that wore makeup morning, noon and night from a teenage years, because I didn't feel pretty enough or slim enough, or all these components that went hand in glove from being a ballerina and an entertainer. So that's really interesting. You obviously, am I right? And I want to hear a little bit about that now. So whereabouts were you born, Sarah?
Okay, I was born in Welwyn in Hertfordshire. I was one of, I have two older brothers and a younger sister. I think there were four of us born in 4 years, so we were quite a close-knit family. I went to the local comprehensive school. My father was a GP, so he was a general practice in Welwyn in Hertfordshire. So there was, but he didn't really talk much about his job. So there's a little bit of medical talk around the table, but not much. I was a keen hockey player, so I played hockey for Welwyn Garden City, and I played for Hertfordshire and the East, and I had a short time I played hockey for England. And then I went to medical school when I was 17, so I didn't take a year out. I was enthusiastic at going, so I qualified as a doctor when I was 22, and then of course you go straight into house jobs, which are in hospital medicine, and it was got married, pregnant, first daughter was born, and at that point I was in general practice. I worked in general practice, say, for 20 years. But as I say, my interest in all this came from my work in general practice when people started asking me the question why. And that is the single most important thing that everybody needs to do. They always have to ask the question why. And okay, we have symptoms because they protect us from ourselves. And you always have to ask the question, why do I have this symptom? What's caused it? Because if you can establish the cause, then I say that has obvious implications for management.
Yes.
As you point out, I'm a rider. So we had ponies when we were children, but only for a couple of years because then the hockey took over. And then as my daughters grew up, we moved to Wales, and I'm now separated from my husband, but they had ponies when they were little, so I got myself a horse so I could ride with the girls. And then I went on into competing, so I started doing some eventing and ended up doing team chasing, which is and point-to-point ruck. So I rode as a jockey for some years and as a team chasing rider as well, which is team chasing is a sport where you have 4 horses, and the clock starts when you cross the starting line, and the clock finishes when the 3rd horse gets home. And it's a course of maybe 1 mile and 2 miles, 2.5 miles, with up to maybe 30 fences, which can be anything up to 6 foot high. So they're big fences that you ride at speed. And after I broke my neck on the 3rd occasion, I decided it was time to stop. So I gave up team chasing a few years ago, and now I'm a happy hacker. I run long distance rides across Wales. We just had a long distance ride this last weekend.
I'm going to say, what's a long distance ride, Sarah? For anybody that doesn't know what that is, what's a long distance ride?
Well, it's whatever. We ride up to maybe 20 or 30 miles in a day, and sometimes we do a loop. So we start at my place and loop round. But once a year we ride across Wales. So we start at my house, and 4 days later we end up at the beach in Islas. And I started.
And this is on your horse. You're saying this is on your horse.
Yeah.
Wow.
I started doing it when my girls were little because I ran the pony club then, so it's for the pony club kids. But then I never stopped doing it. So last year we've done it. We've done it every year since 1997. That we had 1 year off for foot and mouth, and this last year we had about 25 horses, and we stop at barns overnight, so we camp in barns overnight and ride through the day. So it's always good fun.
That's
and
incredible. You see, that's
good...
something I didn't know about you, and I'm so blessed that you've given me a few minutes to just explain a hybrid of how you were, brought up, and what your background, and your father being a medical doctor as well. That's very, very interesting. Did he share any of his wisdom with you, Sarah? Did you feel that you wanted to be in your father's footsteps like that, or how did it work in your family?
Well, he was a very conventional doctor. So my brother also went into medicine, but they stuck with the conventional route. I went off-piste and practiced naturopathic medicine. So I'm known in the family as the witch doctor.
But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yes. How does your father see, your belief systems now? How does that? What's the Christmas table taught like?
Well, he's not very impressed, and he doesn't talk about it. Well, he's dead now, of course. But no, he wasn't interested in my style of medicine at all.
Interesting. But what is great about you is your belief systems are strong, your character is strong. You have to be physically strong to ride a horse, and you have to be able to take control. I don't know a lot about that, but obviously if you're doing these long distance hauls on the horses, and you say you're staying in the barns, do you sleep over with the horses? Just explain that a bit more.
Well, the horses go out in fields, and we have a camp bed, so we just put the camp bed in the barn, so we don't bother pitching tents. So if it rains, then we're under cover, and we sleep in the camp bed, and then get up and off we go in the morning.
And would you agree on that? That's amazing. Would you agree nature is nurture on that? You really are transcending anybody that loves nature and the great outdoors.
Of course. And anybody who walks, who hikes, who bikes, will understand our desire and our need for that view, that scene, that just being outside. I mean, that's why we do things. We just like being out there, don't we? Whether it's in the garden or on the horse or walking or taking the dog out, we all need a dose of nature every day.
That's fantastic. And where are you now, Sarah, may I ask? Whereabouts is your beautiful home today?
In mid Wales. So the nearest town of any consequence is Knighton. But we're about 30 miles due west of Hereford. So I'm just over the border into Wales.
And would you say the health benefits of living somewhere like that over a town? Just tell us a little bit about the difference between the two. If anybody's thinking of moving, which I always am, because I can see that where you are, there's a lot more fresh air, oxygen and everything else. Go on.
Well, of course, I'm very lucky because we have our own spring, so we have our own spring water. And of course, the air is cleaner because there's no traffic and there's no major industry. And because I'm a keen gardener, I grow all my own food, so I rarely go to the supermarket. So I'm pretty much self-sufficient in meat and eggs and vegetables. I don't have any fish here, unfortunately. I would love to have fish, but so that's why I tend to eat. If I eat fish, I tend to eat tin fish because it's very easy to store. So yes, I am, and then we're fairly self-sufficient we cut most of our own wood. So I heat the house with a wood-burning stove. So I'm sitting in my conservatory at the moment, which is a bit cool. So, but anyway, that's how it is.
That's incredible. And what else, Sarah, can you delve into in your, as you say, your toolkit that you could share with us today? Anything that I may have not touched on?
Well, we started talking about detoxing, and that is an important thing to do. Because the fact of the matter is we are all poisoned, whether we like it or not. Yeah. Now, many of those poisons come from food and from the upper fermenting gut. And we have to have a good liver function to deal with that. And for good liver function, we need some B vitamins, we need some minerals, we need some essential fatty acids, and that helps to deal with the toxins from the gut. And then we have toxins from the outside of the world, volatile organic compounds, pesticides, and they get dumped in. They are fat-soluble toxins, and they get dumped in our fat. And so to detoxify toxins that are stuck in our fat, then that's where the heating regimes are very useful. Now, there's number of ways we can do heating regimes, but the one I like best of all are Epsom salt baths. Yeah. Why? Most people got a bath. Most people have got hot water, and Epsom salts are very cheap. You can buy them from epsomsalts.co.uk for a 20 kilogram bag is cost about 35 quid, and that will be enough for 40 baths. So the point is, it costs less than £1 per bath to have an Epsom salt bath, and that warms up the subcutaneous fat and literally boils off the toxins onto the lipid layer on the surface of the skin, from whence they can be washed off. And then in parallel with that, you absorb magnesium and sulfate very well through the skin, and we're all deficient in magnesium, and we're all deficient in sulfate, and the sulfate helps to detoxify. Magnesium's multitask. It's good for mitochondria, it's good for joints, so that's a very good way to detox the volatile organic compounds. And then the third thing we have to think about is heavy metals, because most people are poisoned with heavy metals, whether it's dental amalgam, lead, arsenic from eating rice, or whatever. And now they won't come out from the liver. They won't be detoxified via heating regimes. We have to pull those out with chelating agents. Sulfur is a very good chelating agent. So MSM, I believe, methyl sulfonomethyl, cheap and easy. Taking good minerals will help to displace toxic metals from their binding sites, and then sulfur-containing substances like glutathione then further help to remove it. But sometimes for some patients I use chelating regimes, like using DMSA, dimethyl succinic acid, to pull out their heavy metals or whatever. But all the techniques are detailed in that book if you want the nitty-gritty. But the fact of the matter is, we should all be doing detox regimes because we are all poisoned. Yeah. And you can never get the total load to zero, but if you get it sufficiently low, then the body can cope with that. But if you're overwhelmed with toxins, then the body cannot cope with that, and then you get into problems with the toxins inhibiting mitochondria, upsetting our DNA, etc., etc., etc.
That's very interesting. And I also, Sarah, want to promote your sunshine salt, because this has been a brilliant find. My partner Mark Singleton found this particular salt following your work as well. He's also had ME for 30 years, and we were blessed to meet each other. I think the stars aligned correctly, and we've helped each other through on this journey. But your sunshine salt is something. Can you just tell us a little bit about this while I hold it up, and the benefits of this?
Well, as I say, we are all mineral deficient. And that is the result of modern agriculture, because if you look at minerals in the soil in 1916, 500 parts per million, now a lot less than 50 parts per million. And the reason for that is we don't recycle human sewage back onto the soil. So all our soils are deficient. And of course, for plants to be able to make vitamins, they need minerals, and we need vitamins and minerals for good metabolism. So we are all mineral deficient. Now, I couldn't find a mineral preparation on the market that had got it all, that had got all the minerals we need in decent doses, in the correct proportion, in a form that's soluble and palatable and inexpensive. So that's why I put together sunshine salt, because you just use it in your cooking. It goes in the bread that you're making. You sprinkle on your vegetables, goes in the French dressing or whatever. So whether we like it or not,
tastes delicious. I want to say it tastes delicious. Yeah.
Oh, bless you, bless you. It's got, but it has obviously good dose of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. But it also has all the tracer elements. So it's got zinc, copper, selenium, molybdenum, chromium. It's got 12 of them in total anyway. So it's rich in all the minerals that we need, and we should all be taking it just to get on the starting blocks, as I call it, because we're all deficient.
What's the benefit, Sarah, of your sunshine salt over a standard table salt?
Well, it's got all the minerals. Table salt is just sodium chloride. It's got one mineral in it.
Okay.
Himalayan salt is, Himalayan salt, okay, it's a bit better than table salt, but it's only got one mineral, and it's sodium. It's got tiny amounts of other things, but in such tiny amounts, they're really not going to make much difference.
Right.
So that's why I put together the sunshine salt, because it's got it all in proper physiological doses in a form that can be absorbed and is affordable. So it's much cheaper than any other multi-mineral on the market, and far superior.
Wow. And the other last thing I want to say, because we'll have to draw to a close very soon, sadly, so much to unpack, because you're a fountain of knowledge, and of course a real pleasure to speak with you on all of these different subjects that, as you say, that they're all contributing to our ill health. We're becoming a sick world, and we need to take back control, and, you know, follow pioneers like yourself. And I love that you say, for those people who can't afford the support, that you've implemented strategies so that people understand that you're not here to make a business out of sick health, which is not what you're about. You are here to say, take back control of your own health. Here's my books. Open page 42, and that's going to answer your questions. And therefore, because your time is so precious, Sarah, and you have so much to do, and you have to take care of your own self and your own family and lodgers and people that you spend your time with each day. And of course, because you're a naturopathic lady and living with your farmland animals around, you've got a lot to take care of. And that's how we all should be aspiring to live. You know, you really, I'm so grateful that you did share a little bit about your past, because that gives us a feel and a flair as to how you live your life. And anybody wanting to be more like you and learn from you can just quite literally look at how calm and peaceful and relaxed you are, how knowledgeable you are, because you do cover such a plethora of different opportunities for people to take back control of their own health, something that I independently believed that I had to do. And I know that if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So I want to thank people like yourself for being influences without even your conscious knowledge and awareness on my health and recovery journey. As you can see, I have your book, we have your sunshine salt, and we have a lot of your modalities with us as well. And once again, Sarah, how can people find you? Just remind us of your website in case anybody does want to directly link.
If you just put in Dr. Myhill, then my website comes up, and there's lots of information out there about workshops, books, starter workshops. So you should, and if you can't find anything there, then okay, get in touch with me directly. But there's, if my website would be a very good start.
Dr. Sarah Myhill, thank you so much for your time today. And I'll give the last word to you. God bless you. Thank you for all you do for the community in the field of ME in particular, but also for everybody that's going through any sort of ill health, and anybody that wants to give a boost to their system. A huge thank you for your time today and coming on to the Catherine Vandome and Me podcast. And I'd like to leave the last inspiring words to you, Doctor.
Oh, just take control of your health. Work it out from first principles and just do it.
God bless you. Thank you so much for today, and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye, love.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.